You may have learned about it in school, perhaps driven by.
What I'm interested in is the story of how the building came to be.
We know it as the Arkansas State Capitol, where laws are made, but state leaders call it the People's Building. 100 years ago this week, the state celebrated the completion. Capitol historian David Ware.
We've had 15 years of restoration here. Pretty good birthday party. It was something that was a source of pride to Arkansans when it was built.
Built on the site of an old penitentiary, at least 200 state prisoners helped with construction. The inmates lived in a dormitory that was left on the Capitol grounds. Ware says labor was cheap.
Unfortunately, no plan of the penitentiary is known to have survived, so that when we do excavation outside, sometimes we find foundations and oops, found another piece of penitentiary building.
The marble on the floors and walls came from Vermont, the columns from Colorado, and the grand staircases from Alabama. The exterior limestone, though, was quarried near Batesville, Arkansas. But prior to building, the ground wasn't tested, which led to some surprises.
And so at the south end of what's now the Capitol building, they found quicksand, and they found expanding shale at the north end, which made it necessary to redesign the foundation to make it for a stable building.
The doors, a bronze masterpiece purchased from Tiffany's studio in New York for $10,000 in the early 1900s. They get polished for 4 hours every day. After 9/11, though, for security purposes, they stopped being used as a front entrance. As for the total cost of the entire building, $2.2 million. Today's value, $320 million. That's a nearly 70% increase. And the restoration will continue.
As every year has passed, I know more and more of how much there is yet to discover about this building.
Like these columns, crews recently discovered under several coats of white paint is scagliola, a substitute for marble. One by one, they'll eventually be restored.
If you love this Capitol, you're on my side.
An architectural treasure. And if only the walls could talk, he says, the rich history they could tell. With Made in Arkansas, Ashley Blackstone, THV11 News.
Here it is, the old State House. Well, back then, 1836, it was the not yet completed State House. We had the audacity in this state to begin building a state capitol before we joined the Union.
As Arkansas was about to become a state, the old State House had already been under construction for about 3 years.
As Old State House Development Director Brooke Malloy points out, Arkansas was poor, and anyone who's ever worked with a contractor knows when you run out of money, you cut corners. We made our own bricks. Some you can still see today in the museum. You know those gleaming columns out front? Actually bricks coated with plaster. It was called frontier engineering. And there were problems along the way.
There was a hole in the central temple, so rain fell to the floor until 1842.
1842, when it was completed. All 3 buildings took 9 years to build, and when they were all done, what most Arkansans don't know, the front and the back looked exactly alike. They were identical, and there was a reason.
If you were coming up the Arkansas River on a steamboat, you would see the same gorgeous facade with the columns that you see when you're on Markham Street today.
Yep, we're 177 years old, and thanks to some nifty preservation and a few makeovers and some plaster surgery, we hardly look a day over 140. Happy birthday, Arkansas.